Alright, first thing I need to do is get my material. So this is my down tube, 42 millimeter down tube. Head tube is here. BB is gonna go down here. And one thing I do like to do is actually lay out the length of the butts. So on this tube here, it's got a 1.5 millimeter thick butt that's this long. I can't remember the dimensions. And then the rest of the tube is actually 1.2 millimeters. And my top tube today is 36 millimeters, and this is actually got two different dimensions. So it's 1.3 millimeters on the end here. I think it's 120 mil. This middle section is 0.9, and this C-tube section is also 1.3 mils, but it's just slightly shorter. So when I go to make my cuts for the actual tubes, I'm gonna have it so I cut off a little bit off both sides. What you don't want to do is cut it all off one side and then have the section that's 0.9 where you're going to be doing your welding. So you try to keep both your cuts within the two different butts. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my bite CAD, take a look at it. So my top tube has a miter to miter distance of 485 millimeters. So what I like to do is just take a measure, just a rough measure, and so 485. So I'll basically be cutting about at the T, I don't know if you can see that, and about in the middle of the S there. So what I'm going to do now is take my trusty old layout die here and try not to make a giant mess, and actually wait for it to dry today. And I'm going to lay it out. Now I'm just gonna let that dry. Okay, so now that I've put the layout die on the tubes and approximately where I'm gonna cut them. To use these templates, you have to mark a top or a bottom because they're actually labeled on here. I don't know if you can, there we go, see that. So top and bottom, and these are actually really important because when I have my measurements laid out, so for the down tube here, this is actually the bottom line of the down tube and the bottom line of my top tube. So let's go about doing that now. So how I mark this is I take a nice fine point Sharpie or permanent marker of some capacity, and whoops, bumped the camera. Let's try this left-handed. Not quite long enough, but so that's one. Now let's try the other one. And two. So I have my marks laid on there. The other thing I like to do is just check to make sure that they're square. So you look down the end and they should be pretty straight. So now I need to know my dimensions for my templates. So I'm going to start with my top tube. Just move that to the side. Wait, that doesn't look right at all. Let's try this again. try this with my right hand because I'm actually right-handed. That looks much better. So, have that marked out. So we're gonna use, not this one, this lower line. So now that I have my center line marked, my ends, with the layout die on it is all nice and dry this time, I have to mark out where I need to make my actual cuts. So this is my top tube, and my cuts are from the bottom of my head tube on the deepest part of the miter, or the bottom part of the miter. On that, I don't know if you can read that or not. They need to line up at 485 millimeters. So what I'm gonna do is take my ruler here and then measure out 485 millimeters, keeping in mind where my actual cuts are. $485. So I have a nice, sharp line. That's why I like using the layout die, because it gives you a nice precise line when you use the proper tool like a scribe. So now let's put on my templates. So here we have the head tube and then head tube. So what I'm actually doing is looking down this way. I don't know if you can see. It's kind of weird in the camera, but you can actually look down and see if they're on the same plane. So that I have them both marked out, I'm going to trace this template. So, take my trusty old coping saw and cut this guy. Alright, so now I'm going to take this trusty old file, sit on my archery target because I don't have a real chair in here. I really need to get like a proper stool or bench or something to sit on. But I just use this archery target. And now I'm going to file this away. So I'm not quite all the way to the line, but I'm pretty close, so now I'm gonna go ahead and cut the other side. So another tool that's pretty handy is one of these, I don't even know what they're called actually, angle finder, ruler thing. So it's got graduations on here that tells you the angle what it's at. So if you say you draw your frame by hand or you use BikeCAD, you can actually get that angle from BikeCAD, and then you can just go to double check and make sure. Put that on there. Take a rest. Oh, can you see that? And that'll actually tell you if your angles are correct. So I'm currently reading 77 degrees, I think. 77 degrees. So you're not going to be able to see that probably because maybe you will. The marks are too small, so there's a slight little notch there, and then it corresponds with the degrees. So if you have that degree or know that degree, that's another good way to check to make sure that your tubes are on the right track. So this is the same size tube as the headstock. It's actually what the headstock was made out of. So now I'm just looking to see how tight of a gap I actually have, and that's pretty good. But if I turn this around, if I can find my Allen key, I don't know how in a shop that's 8 square feet, I lose everything. I still have a little bit more cleaning up to do on this side. It doesn't fit as well. See, there's this giant, this giant gap there. So that's okay because I still have a few more millimeters, so that should come out no problem. Okay, so I have it all finished up, the mitering. So one thing I did do is all these edges I have cut sort of on a flat, I guess. I don't even know how to explain it, but they're sort of cut on an angle like this. So when I put them up to the tube, there's a little bit of a root gap, so it's easier to get full penetration on the weld for the aluminum. And this goes just like just about there. So on this side I have just a slight little gap. This is 35 thou filler wire. So it's a little under, I don't know, maybe 20 thou, 25 thou. I don't know how many feeler gauges, or else I would just check it with feeler gauges, but I think I'm happy with that. So that's the top tube. Basically